She came last every single time, and it wasn't just about losing a test. It was about losing hope piece by piece. The cold mornings, the grueling drills, the endless hours of training under the unforgiving eyes of instructors had all taught her one lesson. Sometimes effort isn't enough to be seen. But still, she showed up. She wasn't fast, she wasn't strong, and she wasn't loud, but she was there. Every morning before dawn, she tied her boots, even when her body screamed not to. Every failure left a mark, but every mark became a story of someone who refused to stay down. That is the power of perseverance. Moving forward even when no one is watching. Even when everyone has already made up their minds about you in a place where ranking defined worth. She carried the weight of being last as if it were armor. Others laughed, some pitied her, and a few just ignored her existence. But she began to understand something powerful. Consistency has its own quiet kind of strength. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need applause. It just needs heart. She didn't win the races, but she finished them. She didn't lift the heaviest weights, but she lifted every single time until her hands bled. The others aimed for the top of the scoreboard. She aimed simply not to stop. And while they competed against each other, she competed against her own quitting point. Every failure taught her something no victory could. When her lungs burned, she learned control. When her legs gave out, she learned endurance. When the insults stung, she learned silence. And when loneliness crept in, she learned self-respect. Perseverance isn't about being the best. It's about becoming unbreakable through the process. There's a point where pain stops being the enemy and starts becoming the teacher. She reached that point quietly. While others celebrated small wins, she celebrated surviving another day in a world that expected her to quit. The power of perseverance doesn't roar. It whispers, keep going when the rest of the world says give up. She didn't have any medals or commendations, but she had something else. Consistency that no one could take away. The instructors stopped yelling at her, not because she improved overnight, but because they realized yelling didn't break her. It didn't matter if she was soaked, bruised, or exhausted. She stood back up. The others began to notice. Slowly, respect started to replace ridicule. No one could explain it, but there was something magnetic about her persistence. Every step, every failure, every comeback became a silent rebellion against every limitation they had set for her. She wasn't proving them wrong. She was proving herself right. The thing about perseverance is that it doesn't need instant results. It grows in the shadows, unseen, until one day it becomes impossible to ignore. The SEAL general didn't see a recruit who always failed. He saw someone who refused to surrender. Her name might have been at the bottom of the wall, but her effort was carved deep into the hearts of those who had watched her endure. That's when perseverance transforms from an act of survival to a symbol of strength. It isn't about crossing the finish line first. It's about crossing it no matter how long it takes, no matter how many times you fall before getting there. She had every reason to quit. Mockery, exhaustion, self-doubt. But she didn't. Every night, she lay on her bunk, replaying her mistakes, knowing tomorrow would bring another chance to face them. There were no guarantees, no promises of success, only the quiet hope that persistence would one day matter. That hope became her fuel. It's easy to keep going when you're winning. It's a whole different kind of courage to keep going when you've never won at all. That's what made her story different. It wasn't the outcome, it was the endurance. The courage to persist is what separates those who fade from those who rise. She kept showing up, kept pushing, kept standing tall even when her body and the world told her not to, and in the silence between failure and triumph. Perseverance became her identity. Not because she reached the top, but because she never stopped climbing. She understood that being last didn't mean being lost. It meant she was still in the race. Each failure was a step closer to something unseen, something greater than success itself. It was transformation born out of grit, patience, and the relentless belief that showing up mattered. She didn't chase the finish line anymore. She became the journey itself. That is the unseen strength of perseverance, the kind that turns the overlooked into the unforgettable in every group. There are those who stand out for their speed, their strength, or their natural skill. They're the ones everyone expects to lead, to win, to shine. And then there are the ones who lag behind, who struggle to keep up, who seem to always be one step too slow. She was one of them. No one could deny how hard she worked, but effort alone never seemed enough. Every score she got reminded her that talent comes easy to some and stays hidden from others. Yet deep down, she understood something the gifted didn't. Talent may open doors, but only effort keeps them open. Natural ability can make you good, but consistency makes you unstoppable from the very first test. She had watched others soar ahead. They seemed to glide through drills she could barely survive. The obstacle course that made her stumble and fall was nothing more than a warm-up for the rest. But instead of letting their advantage crush her, she used it to build her endurance. While they trained to win, she trained to last. Every night, when others were asleep, she would practice one more time. She didn't have their speed, but she had time, and she was willing to spend every second of it. There was a quiet defiance in her persistence, the kind that doesn't need recognition to find meaning. The difference between talent and consistency became clearer with every passing week. The talented ones improved quickly, but they also got comfortable. She didn't have that luxury. Every inch of progress she made was fought for, earned through exhaustion and failure. The more she fell behind, the harder she pushed. She learned to make friends with struggle, to find rhythm in repetition, and strength in small victories. Natural talent gives you a head start, but it doesn't prepare you for the moments when everything goes wrong. And when that moment came, as it always does, it was the ones who had struggled from the beginning who knew how to survive. Her instructors saw her as average, maybe even hopeless. But what they didn't see was how deeply she studied every movement, every mistake. The talented rarely need to analyze. Things come naturally to them. But she had to understand every step, every decision, every breath. And through that understanding, she grew sharper. While others relied on instinct, she relied on intention. Slowly, her body learned what her mind had already mastered. She began to move with purpose. Her improvement wasn't loud or visible. It was steady, almost invisible, like a tide rising beneath the surface. That's the quiet strength of consistent effort. It doesn't impress immediately, but it endures. The field of training was a battlefield of egos. Those who had always been the best began to falter when perfection didn't come easily anymore. For them, failure was new, uncomfortable, and unbearable. But for her, failure was familiar. It didn't scare her anymore. It shaped her. She had fallen too many times to be afraid of falling again. That resilience came from consistency, the act of showing up every single day, not for praise, not for approval, but for the discipline of becoming just a little better. Talent may win the first race, but it's consistency that wins the marathon. Her journey started to change not because she suddenly became talented, but because she stopped comparing herself to those who were. She realized her greatest competition was not the top performer. It was the version of herself from yesterday. That shift changed everything. Each day became a quiet battle against her limits. Each repetition was a promise to herself that she wouldn't give in. Slowly, she started to notice what others didn't. Those who had relied on talent began to slow down, while she, steady, disciplined, and relentless, kept moving forward. The distance that once seemed impossible began to shrink. There's something powerful about consistent effort. It doesn't demand results. It demands commitment. It doesn't chase perfection. It builds resilience. She no longer cared about being first or last. What mattered was that she never stopped. Consistency taught her that success isn't about speed, it's about endurance. The most talented can shine, but the consistent ones keep the light burning long after everyone else fades. And somewhere along that path, she stopped being the one who came last. Her progress didn't happen in a single moment of triumph. It happened in countless quiet moments of persistence. The kind no one applauds, but everyone respects when they finally see it. She came to understand that talent might make things easier, but effort makes them meaningful. Those who rely only on what they were born with eventually meet their limits. But those who rely on what they build through discipline have none. In her, the others began to see a reflection of what true strength looks like. Not a flash of brilliance, but a steady flame that refuses to die out. She wasn't the fastest, but she became the most enduring. She wasn't the strongest, but she became the most unyielding. That's what happens when consistent effort outlasts natural talent. It doesn't just change the outcome. It changes the definition of success itself. Recognition is a strange thing. It doesn't always come when you achieve something big. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in a moment you least expect. when someone finally sees what others overlooked. She had never been noticed for winning anything. Her name was never called during announcements. Her scores never earned a nod, and her uniform never carried a single badge of distinction. For most people, acknowledgement came after victory. For her, it came after endurance. What caught the eye of the SEAL general wasn't her performance. It was her persistence. It wasn't the number beside her name. It was the story behind it. Recognition, she would learn, doesn't always belong to the best. Sometimes, it belongs to the one who refuses to stop trying. She had grown used to invisibility. In the long lines of recruits, she was another face among hundreds. The high achievers received handshakes and applause, while she received silence. Yet, that silence taught her something valuable. It stripped away the need for approval. Without applause, she learned to motivate herself. Without praise, she learned to evaluate herself. She began to realize that recognition isn't the goal. It's the result of consistency seen through the right eyes. For the longest time, those eyes never found her. But she didn't change her effort because of it. Day after day, she trained as if someone was watching, even when no one was. That unseen effort built the kind of strength that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. There was a moment during training that changed everything. The recruits had just finished another punishing drill, the kind that pushes everyone past exhaustion. Most collapsed, gasping for air. She was among the last to finish, crawling across the line with trembling arms. No one cheered. No one spoke. But in the corner of her eye, she saw the SEAL general observing quietly. His expression didn't reveal anything, but he had noticed what others hadn't. The way she kept going when every part of her body begged to stop. That look, brief as it was the beginning of something new. It wasn't praise, it wasn't comfort, it was acknowledgement. Recognition born from resilience carries a different kind of power. It's not given for brilliance or speed, but for consistency and willpower. The general had seen many recruits, some strong, some gifted, some loud about their success. But rarely did he see someone who stayed silent in her struggle, who showed up without complaint, who failed without excuses. When he looked at the wall of names, he didn't see rankings. He saw stories. Each name represented effort, failure, triumph, or surrender. When his finger stopped on hers, the one written at the bottom, it wasn't because she was the best. It was because she had earned a kind of respect that can't be measured by scores for her. That moment of recognition wasn't about validation. It was about being seen for the right reasons. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't luck. It was the acknowledgement of something unbreakable inside her. When the general pointed to her name, the entire group turned to look, confused and curious. Some whispered, some frowned, others smirked. But she stood still, unsure if she deserved that spotlight. The general didn't speak much. He simply said that the one who never quits is the one who truly understands what strength means. That single sentence carried more weight than every award combined. In that instant, she realized recognition isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving your resilience right. Her journey to that point had been filled with unnoticed battles. Every bruise, every tear, every lonely evening of self-doubt had built something within her that no ranking could capture. When someone finally recognized that, it wasn't just her effort that was validated. It was her belief in effort itself. True recognition comes when someone sees not what you've achieved, but what you've overcome. And that's what the general saw. He didn't see the number beside her name. He saw the distance she had covered to get there. The lowest position on that wall suddenly carried the highest meaning from that day on. Something shifted, not in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. Recognition didn't change her behavior. It deepened her purpose. She didn't start training harder to impress anyone. She continued training because she had learned that effort is its own reward. The difference was, now she knew that even in a world obsessed with results, persistence still had value. Recognition built on resilience doesn't fade when attention moves on. It stays because it's earned through character, not circumstance. Others began to look at her differently, not as the weakest, but as the one who never backed down. She became a quiet reminder that strength isn't loud. Recognition, when it comes through failure and endurance, isn't about glory, it's about respect. The general's gesture didn't lift her to the top of the wall, but it gave meaning to every moment she had spent at the bottom. In that simple act, the line between success and failure blurred. and the real measure of greatness became something else entirely. The courage to keep showing up long after everyone has stopped watching. Leadership isn't just about giving orders or commanding respect. True leadership is about seeing what others overlook, finding potential where no one else believes it exists. The SEAL general had led countless soldiers, trained warriors who could outlast pain, outthink chaos, and outperform fear. But he knew something most didn't. Strength without understanding means nothing. He had seen too many recruits with talent fade when faced with real struggle, while others with less ability but greater heart found ways to survive. When he looked at her, he didn't see weakness. He saw endurance. He saw someone who had learned through failure what others never learned through victory. That's what leadership does. It looks beyond numbers, beyond appearances, and recognizes value that can't be measured on a scoreboard from the beginning. The others couldn't understand why he paid attention to her. To them, she was a symbol of what not to be: slow, quiet, forgettable. But the general didn't look at her through their eyes. He looked through the eyes of someone who had once been there himself. He understood that real strength doesn't develop in comfort. It grows in the moments of defeat, in the silence after humiliation, in the decision to try again when no one expects you to. He watched her fail, and instead of shaking his head, he took note of the fact that she never once blamed anyone, never once quit. He knew that kind of mindset couldn't be taught. It could only be forged through struggle. And for a leader, finding that kind of heart in a person was more valuable than finding perfection. There was a day during the field drills when every recruit was pushed past their breaking point. The mud, the heat, the exhaustion, it was all designed to expose weakness. Most shouted in frustration, some broke down completely, but she remained silent. Her face was pale, her arms trembling, yet she didn't stop. When everyone else dropped to rest, she kept digging, dragging herself through the course inch by inch. The general didn't say a word, but he saw something in her movement that spoke louder than any declaration of strength. She wasn't competing with others. She was conquering herself. Leadership that sees beyond results recognizes that. The quiet victory of persistence in training, numbers rule. Scores, ranks, and times become the currency of worth. But real leaders know those metrics can be deceiving. The general understood that leadership means looking past statistics to find substance. He knew that anyone can perform when they're strong, but only a few can perform when they're broken. She had been broken again and again, but every time, she came back with a little more resolve. That was the quality he valued most, the kind that can't be charted but can be felt. A true leader doesn't look for the best performer. They look for the one who will never give up when the mission turns impossible. The general's decision to point at her name on the wall wasn't spontaneous. It was a lesson in leadership for everyone watching. He wanted them to understand that recognition isn't about rewarding success. It's about honoring resilience. He didn't need to give a long speech. His gesture said everything. When his finger stopped on her name at the bottom, every recruit felt a shift. It was as if the rules of what mattered had changed. The wall no longer represented ranking, it represented courage. By pointing to her name, he reminded them all that leadership doesn't elevate the best. It uplifts the ones who never stop trying. She didn't fully grasp what it meant at first. For her, it was confusing, almost uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone by someone like him. But over time, she understood what the moment symbolized. It wasn't about praise, it was about recognition of character. The general wasn't telling her she had succeeded. He was telling her she had the kind of strength that leaders build teams around. Real leadership isn't about molding perfect soldiers. It's about seeing the hidden fire in the imperfect ones and helping it grow. By acknowledging her, he showed everyone that heart matters just as much as skill. The rest of the recruits learned something that day too. Some who had once mocked her started to see her differently. They began to realize that being noticed by the general wasn't about being flawless. It was about being relentless. That's the kind of leadership that transforms people. It changes the culture around you. When someone in authority recognizes persistence, it teaches everyone else to value it too. The camp's energy shifted. The top performers pushed harder, not to protect their rank, but to earn that kind of respect. The ones who had been struggling found new hope, knowing that their effort wasn't invisible. All of it stemmed from a single act of leadership that dared to look beyond the surface. The SEAL general never explained why he did it. He didn't have to. Real leadership doesn't need to justify compassion or belief. It speaks through example, through the quiet recognition that greatness often hides in those who seem ordinary. He understood that behind every strong soldier is a moment of doubt they chose to overcome. When he looked at her name, he didn't see last place. He saw a story of perseverance that would outlast every rank on that wall. That's what true leadership is. It sees not just who someone is today, but who they're fighting to become. Belief is a quiet force. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, but when it's given to someone who's never had it before, it can change everything. For her, belief had always been something distant, almost foreign. No one had ever looked at her and seen potential. Teachers, trainers, even peers had all decided early on that she wasn't built for greatness. When you hear that enough times, you start to believe it yourself. But belief can also be contagious. When someone finally sees something in you, a spark you didn't know you still had begins to burn again. That's what happened the moment the SEAL general pointed to her name. It wasn't just recognition. It was the start of belief. Up until that moment, she had carried herself like someone trying not to be noticed. She did her work, followed orders, and blended into the background. It wasn't that she didn't care. She simply didn't think she mattered enough to stand out. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone lost in a place built for the strong. But then came that day, the day her name was spoken by someone who had never wasted a word. The general's gesture wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. And in that small act, something shifted inside her. For the first time, she realized that maybe her effort wasn't invisible. Maybe someone had seen the struggle she had hidden behind quiet endurance. Belief has a strange way of reviving broken confidence. She didn't suddenly become faster or stronger, but her energy changed. The weight on her shoulders didn't feel so heavy anymore. Every morning when she tied her boots, she did it with a new kind of purpose. Before, she trained to survive. Now, she trained to honor the belief someone else had placed in her. There's a kind of magic in that. When someone believes in you, even slightly, it pushes you to live up to it. She didn't want to let him down, not because she feared him, but because he had given her something priceless, validation that she could be more than what everyone thought she was. The others noticed it too. The same recruits who used to ignore her began to see a different version of the girl they once overlooked. Her posture changed, her movements became sharper, her presence stronger. It wasn't pride, it was confidence built on belief. For the first time, she wasn't just going through the motions, she was fighting for something. The general hadn't given her skill or shortcuts. What he gave her was the realization that her fight mattered. And that's the power of belief. It doesn't make things easier. It makes them possible. There were still hard days, days when her body ached and the drills felt endless. But now, quitting wasn't an option she even entertained. Every time she reached her breaking point, she remembered that moment at the wall. She remembered the look in the general's eyes, steady, sure, unshaken. It wasn't the look of pity. It was the look of someone who saw potential buried deep beneath fatigue and failure. She realized that when someone believes in you, they're not just seeing who you are, they're seeing who you could become. And sometimes, that vision is enough to pull you through the moments when you've lost sight of your self-belief. From others can ignite self-belief, and that's where transformation begins. For her, it started small. She began to talk less about what she couldn't do and more about what she would try to do. Her focus shifted from avoiding mistakes to mastering challenges. She stopped comparing herself to others and started measuring herself against the person she had been the day before. That mental shift was more powerful than any physical strength she could build. It gave her control over her own narrative. For the first time, she wasn't defined by failure. She was defined by persistence and potential. The general continued to observe her progress, never offering empty praise, but always watching. He understood what belief can do. It doesn't need to be repeated, it just needs to be real. And every time she stumbled, she remembered that he had already seen her at her lowest and still chosen to believe in her. That thought gave her strength that no amount of encouragement could replace. Belief doesn't erase weakness. It gives you the courage to face it. It turns doubt into drive and fear into focus. That's what began to happen within her day after day as the weeks passed. The wall of names stopped feeling like a scoreboard. It became a reminder of where she started and how far belief had taken her. She didn't climb the ranks overnight, but her mindset had changed completely. Every drop of sweat, every bruise, every challenge became proof that she was still fighting, and that she was no longer doing it alone. Someone had believed in her before she had earned it, and that single act made her want to earn it every day. That's what belief does. It turns endurance into purpose. And sometimes, that's all a person needs, to be seen not for where they are, but for where they could rise if only someone pointed to their name and said, "I believe in that one failure is heavy." It clings to you like a second skin, whispering that you'll never be enough, that you'll always come up short no matter how hard you try. For her, failure had become a daily companion. Every test, every drill, every challenge ended with the same result: last place. The others looked at her and saw weakness. The instructors saw disappointment. She saw exhaustion. But what no one realized was that something was forming beneath all those failures. Each time she fell, each time she tasted defeat, a spark grew stronger inside her. Humiliation didn't break her, it built her. Every moment of embarrassment became another layer of armor, and every failure became a lesson in resilience. That's how she began to turn her pain into power. In the beginning, she used to hide her frustration. After another failed attempt, she would retreat to the edge of the field, pretending she was fine while her eyes burned with quiet anger. But that anger began to change shape. Instead of pushing her down, it started to push her forward. She realized she had two choices. She could let failure define her, or she could use it to refine her. Every time someone laughed, every time someone doubted her, she stored it away, not as shame, but as fuel. There's something powerful about a person who learns to burn doubt instead of being burned by it. That's what she was becoming. Not better overnight, but stronger with every setback. The more she failed, the less afraid she became of failure itself. At some point, the fear stopped controlling her. She started to see patterns in her mistakes, understanding that failure wasn't random. It was a teacher. Each fall showed her where she was weak, and each weakness showed her where to focus. That shift in mindset changed everything. While others feared imperfection, she started to embrace it. Every bruise, every sore muscle, every missed mark became proof that she was still trying. She no longer cared how long it would take or how many times she would fall. What mattered was that she didn't stop. That's when failure stopped being punishment and started being preparation. Turning humiliation into motivation is an art few master. It requires swallowing pride, standing still in discomfort, and choosing growth over ego. She learned that no amount of mockery could match the strength built through persistence. When others mocked her for finishing last, she smiled, not out of defiance, but because she knew she had finished. Every time they pointed out her mistakes, she silently promised herself she'd fix them. She didn't fight back with words, she fought back with effort. Slowly, the things that once humiliated her began to inspire her. The very moments that had made her want to give up became the same moments that made her unstoppable. She began to develop a rhythm of quiet determination. When she fell behind, she no longer panicked. When she failed, she no longer felt defeated. She started to see failure as part of her training, as essential as the drills themselves. Pain became familiar, not frightening. She realized that progress doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from enduring it. And the more she endured, the more she changed. Her body grew stronger, her mind steadier, her will sharper. Those who had once pitted her began to notice her differently. They couldn't understand how someone who lost so often could keep coming back stronger each time. But that was the secret. Every failure had trained her for resilience in a way success never could. The day the SEAL general pointed to her name, it wasn't because of a single victory. It was because of the hundreds of small battles she had fought in silence. He saw what failure had built inside her: discipline, endurance, humility, and courage. These weren't traits that came from winning. They came from surviving loss after loss and still choosing to return. That's what set her apart. While others feared humiliation, she had learned to use it. She had turned the sting of mockery into the spark of motivation. That's what made her extraordinary. The ability to stand where she once fell and keep moving as if the world's doubt no longer had weight. Each morning, when she looked at her reflection, she didn't see the girl who always came last anymore. She saw a fighter, a survivor, someone who had learned that strength isn't about perfection, it's about endurance. The tests still came, the challenges still hurt, but she faced them with new eyes. Every setback was a chance to rebuild stronger than before. She began to crave the struggle, knowing that every ounce of pain brought her closer to the person she was meant to become. What used to break her now built her, and what used to humiliate her now humbled her in the best way possible. That's the quiet transformation that happens when failure becomes your teacher. You stop fearing it. You start respecting it. She no longer needed validation, no longer chased comparison. Her focus had shifted entirely, no longer about being first, but about becoming unbreakable. Every scar carried a story of growth. Every defeat carried a seed of strength. The same people who once doubted her now watched in silence, realizing that the one they had mocked had become the one they admired. Because she had done what few ever learned to do. She took her pain, her humiliation, and her endless failures, and turned them into the fire that forged her resilience.